Pia for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. Thank you very much. We are grateful to the briefers for their statements and for their very interesting ideas. We're also grateful to Mr. Simpson for preparing and presenting the review, the study of the independent group of experts on the role of youth in processes related to peace and security. Its contents and recommendations will no doubt enrich the contents of discussions of member states on those platforms of the United Nations where this topic has a direct relation. Now, the resolution, the Security Council 2250 from the 9th of December that mandated this study underscored the important role that youth can and should play in building a modern society free of terrorism and extremism, including through constructive participation in the processes of building and sustaining peace. It's true that the issue of youth, no matter how much we would like to, cannot be seen separately from the context of countering the threats of extremism and terrorism. And in fact, young people, unfortunately, are often the first to be exposed to these threats. A lax attitude regarding the activity of terrorist groups has already led to these groups threatening the future of entire states, and the societies of these states are plunged into social, political, and economic chaos. This is particularly clear in the examples of Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Other states, not only in the Middle East, are also threatened with a similar fate. Young people with as yet an unformed worldview and seeking self-identity and lacking a rich experience, and sometimes, unfortunately, lacking education, are an extremely vulnerable layer of our societies. Youth are the first to feel the consequences of economic crises, social instability, and military clashes. These factors are often used by evildoers to involve young people in illegal activity, including by the use of social media or other internet resources. And here we're not only talking about terrorism and the extremism that leads to terrorism, but processes controlled from outside, political processes aimed at overthrowing the legitimate authorities under the cover of slogans about democracy. The very fashionable and stated support for young leaders should not be converted into preparing anti-government movements by external players in states that they do not support. The unethical use for this of young people's interest in protest and their lack of experience and wish to self-fulfillment. Young people are fooled and used for illicit purposes under unfair and dishonest claims. The unacceptable lax attitude of certain states to the increase in nationalism, xenophobia, which unfortunately are the most successful in involving young people into their and putting them under their influence. To counter all these phenomena, what's essential are thorough efforts at prevention and especially at the national level. Now, first and foremost, the aim and responsibility of states is to prevent the influence of terrorists, radicals, and political evildoers on young people by countering extremist propaganda and strengthening the resilience of youth to such propaganda. At the same time, the internet, just as the traditional media, must be used to promote a positive agenda. what's important is to actively promote among young people, and with their help, the idea of mutual respect, intercultural and interreligious dialogue, taking into account local traditions and specificities. There should not be any politicizing here. Young people should be protected from political influence until young people reach their legal age. Secondly, it's essential to create conditions for the personal fulfillment of young people, for their social and economic integration into society, including by providing opportunities for obtaining a quality education and providing employment. And now, effective instruments in this process are, of course, creative pursuits, culture, and sports. These activities give young people an opportunity to take part in socially meaningful activity, contribute to enhancing skills and talents, bolster self-confidence, and in fact inculcate the ideas of peaceful coexistence. Lastly, we shouldn't also forget the importance of strengthening the family and family values. Many of the problems that we hear about are due to neglect of these values and excessive focus on individualism and destruction of centuries-old social norms. The process of involving young people in any kind of political activity should be a natural process. It should be based first and foremost on professional skills and abilities that are acquired by young people. Here there should be truly equal rights, and this requires not only support for the most vulnerable in society, but also the fact that any kind of artificial quotas or privileges, including based on age or gender, should not be acceptable. We believe that it's important to constructively tap into the potential of young people, in particular their energy, their versatility, their ability to find their bearings quickly in cyberspace, including to create in a society a zero tolerance for violence and a rejection of the ideas of extremism and terrorism. There's no doubt that states that are confronted with conflicts are in the most difficult situation, where in these states implementing programs and strategies for youth for obvious reasons are very difficult and sometimes basically impossible. And particularly acute in these countries is the issue of the protection of civilians, including young people, which are under the responsibility of national governments. I would like to just recall in this connection that the efforts of the international community should be aimed at supporting national efforts in this area. The adoption by the international community of any measures of response, especially the use of force, can only be with the authority of the Security Council and with strict adherence to the provisions of the United Nations Charter. It's also important by all parties to the armed conflict to comply with the obligations applicable to them under the norms of international law on the protection of civilians, including young people, and also of the 1949 Geneva Convention and the Additional Protocol of 1977. It's important is to conduct a thorough, objective investigation based on reliable information of crimes related to the intentional attacks or the use of the excessive use of force, and it's important to punish those who are guilty. Mr. President, Russia has a first-hand knowledge of the importance of an interactive cooperation with young people. It's difficult to overestimate the fresh ideas that young people can bring to us in exchange for the knowledge that we convey to them. In 2014, the government of the Russian Federation adopted the conceptual basis for its state youth policy to 2025. The key principle of this conceptual basis is the reliance on young people as the main vector of the innovative development of a state. And it's important to create all conditions for the development of the human potential of youth people as that vector. Now, fully fledged and continuous support for young people seeks to ensure the long-term development of our society. Now, to unite young people, the holding of forums and international events also plays a very important role. In October of 2017, we were happy to host in Sochi the 19th International Festival of Youth and Students, where over 20,000 people from over 180 countries took part. In the course of that event, many interesting ideas were voiced, including some of those that we heard today from our young speakers. We, of course, are taking into account these ideas in our work in supporting youth. Mr. President, in conclusion, I'd like to note a few important points. First of all, in spite of the importance of the topic of youth, trying to find the youth-related aspects of some of the acute problems that we're discussing today should not, in fact, get in the way of adults trying to resolve some of these issues. We shouldn't have a merely formal approach. We shouldn't. There should be some sort of competition of who proposes the most number of solutions or approaches to issues of youth. Not all problems that stand before us will be resolved in this way. The main responsibility for the resolving these issues will not be shifted from our shoulders, from the shoulders of the adults. I would also like to point out that in spite of the extreme importance of today's discussion, it's important to preserve the effectiveness of the United Nations and follow the division of mandates of the various bodies of this organization. The Security Council, according to the United Nations Charter, bears the main responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. Every day around this table we discuss issues of war and peace that require urgent and sometimes immediate decisions. Obviously, the Council does not operate in isolation. In each discussion, we rely on the experience and expertise of experts who work on a daily basis on developing seminal documents based on their specialization. Now, an in-depth discussion in specialized UN platforms of such aspects of youth as education, employment, sustainable development, human rights would be much more effective. What's important is not to create the illusion that bringing these topics related to youth to the Security Council will lead to a breakthrough and allow for more effective solutions in dealing with them. We are convinced that the Security Council has neither the right nor enough expertise in order to abuse its authority by wresting such discussions from the experts. We believe that general issues, as well as topics that are not directly related to threats to international peace and security, should be discussed in depth in an international platform specially created for that purpose. Now, bringing up a topic or not bringing up a topic for discussion in the Security Council should not become a criteria for its importance or non-importance to the international community. Let us be more responsible in strictly adhering to the existing division of labor. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his